Your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Mid Morning Talk with Najma Kota. I'll be with you right up until 1 o'clock. Remember, between 12 and 1, we speak to Fairuz, who is our halal hopper. We're off to Malaysia in our travel segment. In our wellness segment today, I'm speaking to Sister Mumtaaz Cajee. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before we introduce the topic on personality disorders. She says, I grew up in a small Indian community west of Johannesburg. Growing up, I witnessed the lack of mental health awareness within my community. It was evident that mental health was not acknowledged, let alone prioritized, not only within my immediate surroundings, but within the community as a whole. At Conscious Psychology, I am one of 8 Indian psychologists that provide therapy to clients that have gone through similar experiences as I have. We also spread awareness through our social media and have over 100,000 followers in South Africa. I'm a counseling psychologist. I love working with people and find comfort in making a difference in the lives of others. I chose this profession as I firmly believe that mental health is as essential as physical health, and a strong mind breeds a healthy life. And I'm so glad we're speaking to Mumtaaz. You know what I like about this, Sister Mumtaaz, is that you've attached a personal experience to this, and you know how important it is from a space of empathy. So, and I think that sets the bar or the difference between a counseling psychologist and one who has actually been healed, as it were. So, assalamu alaikum and welcome, Mumtaaz.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me today.
Ramadan Kareem to you and your family.
Ramadan Kareem.
Before we went on air, we were quite specific about how we're going to relate this topic to our audience, because it shouldn't be, going over the head, or it doesn't belong to someone else, or this doesn't interest me because I don't think we have an issue. So I think we first need to break it down as, what do we mean? Because personality disorders, sometimes, a lot of it is used quite loosely in casual discussions, like that's a narcissist, or that's an OCD, or that's a bipolar. It's necessary to be clinically diagnosed in order to have one of those symptoms, if you like, of those disorders. So let's talk generally first about personality disorders, and we know that there are many. So to break them down, we might not have time, but give us a general overview of personality disorders.
Sure. I think the most important part, just relating to our initial discussion, is that with social media, a lot of people are self-diagnosing or just diagnosing people within their families or their partners with narcissism or borderline personality disorder. So it's very important for us to avoid that. Only a professional can, through a very critical analysis, diagnose somebody with a personality disorder. So personality disorders are a set of rigid, unhealthy patterns of thinking, functioning, and behaving. And these tend to influence a person's social and occupational functioning, and that's what makes them disorderly. So they tend to have trouble perceiving situations and relating to other people and to situations, which then tend to interfere with their functioning and their behavior. They begin generally in teenage years or in early adulthood. And it's like I said, it's not easy to diagnose somebody with a personality disorder.
Right. And if you don't mind, can you let us into some of your personal experiences before you actually decided to become a professional in the field?
Sure.
Without being too personal, yeah?
No problem. So I grew up in a small Indian Muslim community. And just growing up in general, going to my primary school was like the local Indian school, and going to madrasa and experiencing other people, my family, people within my community. It was very evident that mental health was not a priority. People just overlooked it. Emotional intelligence was not considered, not prioritized in our educational system. Emotional awareness was literally not evident. Yeah, and then when I went to high school, I actually changed schools, and then did we have a counselor at school? Then did we learn about mental health and learn about all these other aspects that was so important? And then did I come to basically take note of what was lacking at home in my community, what was lacking at the schools, but the teachers, that we didn't even have a school counselor at the time. And it just showed me personally through my own experiences, and also just seeing people at madrasa, knowing what was going on in the community, how much we lacked and how much we actually need to integrate these aspects within our communities.
And how have you found since you started practicing? How has that improved in the sense of awareness? Because you speak about your social media platforms, where you've made the effort to actually reach out and educate people on it.
Yeah, so to be honest, initially when I was doing my internship, it was very difficult. I did my internship in East London, where there's a very small Indian community, and it was still very difficult. Mental health is quite a taboo topic there still for a lot of the community itself. And then when I moved back to Johannesburg, I started working at Conscious Psychology. And what I love about the practice is that we target brown people. Our social media looks at issues and relating mental health and relating the disorders and the experiences to brown people. Because what previously has happened is mental health and psychology and psychiatry and medicine as a whole is very Western oriented. So it never ever focused on our struggles, on our context. And that was a big issue. And what we are finding now is through the social media and through basically this awareness that's being created, not only by us, but by psychologists all over the country, we
Uh-huh.
are bringing in a lot of Indian clients, a lot of
Mm.
people who are recognizing that actually I experienced this. I thought it was normal. This is why
Mhm.
I think this way or behave this way, is because of my experiences. And now I can seek help.
Right. So what you're then saying is that you needed to contextualize it for the Indian community, as it were, because it was so taboo, or because it's just a lack of understanding.
I think a bit of both, actually.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, so
Mhm.
if we now have to talk about personality disorders and how are they diagnosed, each one, of course, has its own set of diagnostic tools, if you like. But generally, you did give us an overview, but how would you diagnose it? And how would a person or a family member know that there's intervention necessary now?
Okay, so let's begin with identifying whether it's necessary for somebody to be diagnosed.
Right,
So basically, with all diagnoses, all disorders in psychology or psychiatry, it only becomes an issue where the person's functioning, whether it be social functioning, educational functioning, or occupational functioning, is being affected negatively. So if
right.
somebody is struggling at work, struggling to communicate or function within the home environment or at school, that's when we know intervention is needed. And of course, the first step is to see a professional. A lot of people try these online self-diagnosis tools, which are not helpful at all. Even for psychologists, we don't just meet a person once and immediately say, here's your diagnosis, here's your treatment, you can go home now. It's a long process of long-term treatment, of processing, of understanding this person's experiences. How did they develop these rigid, unhealthy patterns of thinking and behaving, and then unpacking it through the process of long-term therapy.
Right. And how often does one, I think people shy away from that kind of intervention because they fear being medicated for it, and that has another taboo and stigma to it. It's not necessary, right? Not in all cases.
No, not at all. Actually, a lot of practices now, including ours, we aim to leave medication as like a last resort or unless it's extremely necessary. And with personality disorders, it generally doesn't come with being medicated, it comes with committing to therapy.
Right. Absolutely. So, can we name some of those personality disorders?
Sure.
What
So
are
there
we
are
looking at here? Yeah.
There are 10 personality disorders in total, and they are divided into 3 clusters based on their similarity of characteristics. So we have our cluster A, which is paranoid personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, and schizotypal personality disorder. And these are clustered together because they are similar in the thoughts and behaviors that are quite odd or eccentric. So I'm sure you can tell that by paranoid is quite straightforward. These people tend to be quite paranoid, they're distrusting of others, they feel as though other people are there to harm them. And then your schizoid is more like a lack of interest in social relationships, so they can be quite inhibited, excuse me. And your schizotypal is a very peculiar type of presentation, so they have a peculiar type of dressing, thinking, their belief systems. They have very odd like experiences, and their emotional range is quite flat. And then we can move on to your cluster B. Your cluster B is what we see more on social media and people speak a lot about, which is your dramatic, overly emotional, unpredictable presentation of a personality disorder. So over there, we have your antisocial personality disorder. These people have complete disregard for others. They often get in trouble with the law. They just act quite recklessly. They can be quite impulsive and just violate other people's rights, even their own, and just cause basically unsafe environments for other people with a complete disregard for what they are doing or the circumstances of their actions. Then we
Right.
have the borderline personality disorder. These people are quite impulsive, they have very unstable or fragile self image, and they have quite unstable relationships. Their moods can be quite up and down. Um, and they have this intense fear of being alone or being abandoned, and that's what drives their emotions and drives their behavior. And then thirdly, within cluster B, we have the histrionic personality disorder. These people are quite dramatic, so they're constantly seeking attention through their behavior. And they have this excessive concern about their physical appearance, and they think that relationships with others are much closer than they actually are. They can be quite overly dramatic and sexually provocative in order to get attention. And then lastly, and social media's favorite disorder is narcissism. And
Yes.
basically, these people believe that they are special or more important than others. They have this false sense of grandeur, of importance. They think that or rather, they will exaggerate their success and their talents and what they are capable of. And they can seem quite arrogant, and they almost have this unreasonable expectation of favors. So they tend to take advantage of other people and think that other people are envious of them. So that is our cluster B. And then lastly, we have the cluster C, which is your more fearful or anxious presentation. And there we have the avoidant personality. So these people are very sensitive to criticism and judgment. So they fear it so much that they will literally avoid doing work or involving themselves with people who or situations that require social interaction. They can be quite shy, and they have this intense fear of being disapproved or embarrassing themselves or being ridiculed. And then we have the dependent personality. So these people are overly dependent. They don't have any confidence in their own abilities. So they feel like they need to be dependent on somebody. They constantly need that assurance. They constantly need somebody to help them. So they struggle to even start tasks alone. And they have this intense fear of just being independent, or like this lack of confidence of doing things by themselves, that even if they lose a close relationship, they have this intense need to replace that person with somebody else, somebody to depend on.
Right.
Lastly is our obsessive compulsive personality disorder. This one's also important to address because people on the internet and just in general will just throw out this diagnosis of, oh, I have OCD. And
Correct.
it's a huge misconception because what they're actually referring to is OCPD, which is what we're talking about here, which is the personality
Right.
disorder,
Right.
which is
Right.
a preoccupation with details and a preoccupation with perfectionism and needing things to be a certain way up to their standards. So they'll do everything themselves. They would like to be in control of people and situations and tasks, and would resist delegating tasks to people because they want to be in control and they want things to be up to their standard. And they can be quite rigid and stubborn and inflexible with their values and their morals and their ethics, and just basically will even put off social events and social activities to focus on doing their work just so that it can be perfect. But even so, even in this people's self-diagnosis of OCD, when it should be OCPD, it's an over-exaggeration, because this only becomes a disorder, like I said earlier, is when it interferes with your social, occupational, or educational functioning.
Right. It's important to know the difference, because you could be just a very organized person and you can't be diagnosing yourself as OCD. When we come back, we speak to our very special guest, Mumtaaz Cajee, on personality disorders, and we find out on how to treat it, or what are the main goals. What is the treatment approach for this type of disorders that she's just listed to us?
Impact this Ramadan. Donate your zakah to Ashraful Aid. Your zakah can help feed an orphan, support a widow, build a home for a refugee family, sponsor a HIF student, and much more. With Ashraful Aid, you can make a real difference. Visit our website at www.ashrafulaid.org to make a donation. Make your Ramadan meaningful with Ashraful Aid.
The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked, which charity is best? He replied, a drink of water.
Africa.
Every day, 2 billion people wake up and have no access to water and sanitation. Sponsor a water well for 14,800 rand, a borehole in Afghanistan for 49,500 rand, or a borehole in Africa for 55,000 rand with Africa Muslims Agency. Give water as a means of sadaqah jariyah today. Call AMA on 011 834 8685 or donate online. Africa Muslims Agency, commemorating 35 years of empowering, educating, inspiring.
This Ramadan, spread the love with Sunshine D margarine, the perfect addition to your seri table for spreading, baking, and cooking. Sunshine D is rich in essential vitamin A, E, and D, and is the tastiest way to get their day or night started. Sunshine D. Tastes nice, no lies.
At Sentio, our Invest for Good philosophy is based on a genuine desire to use our investment skills for the benefit of broader society by investing responsibly, giving charitably, and developing talent that will transform the investment industry. Visit www.sentio-capital.com for more information about our Sharia investment products and start saving with us today. Sentio Capital. Invest for good. Sentio Capital Management is an authorized financial services provider.
These days, I'm more health conscious than ever. So tonight, it's stir fry for dinner, cooked in healthy Helios pure sunflower cooking oil. Helios is pure sunflower goodness, packed with omega-6. That's good for your heart, and is approved as part of the Heart and Stroke Foundation eating plan. Dinner's ready! Helios, pure sunflower cooking oil. A healthy family is a happy one.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company. Salam Media, your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
Learning how to aid people with personality disorders is our discussion with Mumtaaz Cajee, Counselling Psychologist. Before the break, I wanted to know, Mumtaaz, what are the main goals of psychotherapy for treating personality disorders? And I'm sure there are many, but I'm sure you can break it down so people can understand what to expect and that it's not so difficult.
The goals obviously would speak directly to the cause of personality disorders. And what we're finding, especially within our brown communities, is that trauma and neglect is the main drive and the main reason that results in people having these unhealthy patterns of thinking, which then influence their functioning and behavior. So, a good place to start with therapy is generally to just unpack past trauma, childhood, and what that looks like for our brown community, or and I don't really mean the Indian community when I say brown community. I actually mean our Black South Africans, our Indians as a whole, is unpacking what was childhood like for you. Because what we are finding is a very big trend of emotional neglect, and not in
Uh-huh.
the sense, more in like emotions are not spoken about when we
Right.
are, we're not taught the skills to deal with our emotions or to even identify our emotions. We are not
Correct.
taught how to support each other emotionally. And this goes back generations.
Right. Right. And do you find that people find it difficult to actually talk about it? Is that your first challenge, I guess, with your patients, clients?
Yeah, it definitely is a challenge. It also depends on where the person is at. So, a lot of people, because of social media and because of mental health awareness, have started on their wellness journey before beginning therapy. So, they would have started
Okay.
with journaling and things like that. Those people tend to get into the process of therapy a little easier than people who just decide on a whim, you know what, I'm not functioning that well, so I'm going to try therapy. And it also depends on your personality and your temperament in how open are you to speak about these things and how
Right.
aware are you of your trauma. With a lot of people who experience trauma, we tend to dissociate at a young age. So, what that means
Correct.
is you're just kind of in survival mode going through the motion, and these people will not actually have that many memories of their childhood. So, if you
Yeah.
had to ask, tell me what happened to you in grade 6, for example. It would be extremely difficult for them to recall that information because
Right.
since they were experiencing a certain type of trauma or neglect, be it big or small, they would have dissociated. And so they're just going through the motions of each day trying to survive, not
Right.
really being present in the moment and experiencing life.
Hmm.
And so with those people, it's a little bit more challenging to get back and get them to remember their childhood and get to remember the trauma.
Right. So, we spoke about the deterrents such as stigma, etc. But it's also affordability sometimes that, holds people back from getting psychotherapy. It's regarded as something that's more for the, socially, socioeconomically viable people, if you like. So,
Yeah.
how do you appeal to that group of people in our country?
So it definitely is an issue and a very difficult issue to address because at the end of the day, it would be easy to look at people within the medical profession and say, you need to be able to provide services. You need to be able to provide affordable services. But at the end of the day, firstly, we have extensive fees that we pay to the HPCSA. Secondly, it's
Correct.
also mental health professionals and professionals at large, our bread and butter. But as practices and as like more inclusive practices, we do, for example, our practice charges a medical aid rate. So if you do have a medical aid, no matter what scheme you're on, they will cover most likely at least 8 to 15 sessions a year. And for people who do struggle to pay, there is that conversation that could be had of with your psychologist, whoever it may be. This is my affordability, or this is how much I can pay per session. And we are willing to negotiate a realistic fee, of course.
Hmm. How important is making people aware of, I mean, we're doing this now, I'm probably answering the question while I'm asking it, or we've probably answered it already, but it's so misunderstood. How important is it for us to keep reaching out and saying, if we talk about some of the types of therapies that we can use, like DBT, for example, or cognitive behavioral therapy, to treat personality disorders. People will then just go onto Google and find out, and that's one thing that I myself, as a practitioner, always discourage it because it's not for you, it's not individualized. So I think one needs to understand, from your point of view, on today's program make an appeal in that regard as well.
Definitely. It's easy to go onto Google and to buy all of the self-help journals in the world and think that I'm on a journey. And you are on a journey, but you're also limiting your journey, because what in-person therapy is, or face-to-face therapy or talk therapy actually does, is you have somebody with experience and with the professional knowledge to be able to reflect back at what you're saying, reflect back at your thoughts, reflect back at your behavior. Whereas, think about a personality disorder. The main thing is this unhealthy pattern of thinking. So if you have this unhealthy pattern of thinking, how are you going to challenge your own thinking? And that's where
Absolutely.
the psychological tools come in. And that's where the importance of therapy and just having a professional sit through navigating and processing your experience of your disorder and of your life with you is so important.
Right. Do you also find that you be more appealing, you use the term brown, just in closing, as a Muslim therapist, do you find that there's a difference in terms of the type of clientele you would attract?
Definitely, we do more because of the social media and because we speak to a specific audience, but we also do get a broad range of clients. But what I find is a lot of clients actually choose to come to us after seeing a psychologist, for example, who's not a Muslim Indian, and say they just didn't understand. So oftentimes, in establishing boundaries, for example, a psychologist from another culture will say, well, why don't you just distance yourself from your mom or distance yourself from your parents? They don't understand the cultural implication or the cultural obligations and religious obligations that we have. And so
Indeed.
it becomes a very frustrating experience to go to therapy with somebody who doesn't have that background knowledge or that understanding.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Mumtaz, for spending your time with us and sharing your knowledge with us. We wish you all the best in your endeavors, inshallah, and I hope we've made the right appeal today.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
All right, when we come back, we're off to Malaysia. What makes Malaysia so fascinating in its diversity? In the same country, you can explore thriving modern cities, explore colonial architecture, relax on some of the most beautiful beaches on the planet, and hike through lush green jungles. We speak to Feiruz, the halal hopper, after this break.